Hi everybody, I'm KHOU meteorologist Pat Calvin coming to you from Houston, Texas, and this is your tropical update on Wednesday, September 14th, 2022. For the first time in a while, we've got a new system that we are watching, just formed this morning about 800 miles to the east of the Leeward Islands. It's Tropical Depression 7, not a named storm yet, but the National Hurricane Center does expect some type of development into a named system, into a tropical storm, at least over the next 24 to 48 hours. So right now winds are sustained at 35 miles per hour. It's moving to the west at about 15 miles per hour. Here's the first track, the official track from the National Hurricane Center. We are expecting this system again to reach tropical storm strength sometime as we get into the next 24 to 48 hours. By Friday, then, it reaches the Greater Antilles, so the Leeward Islands here. And then the question is, where within this cone does this system go? Because remember, it can go anywhere within this cone, and obviously it's going to make a big difference because you've got a lot of land interaction here. But we're expecting impacts along the Greater Antilles from the Virgin Islands all the way back to Hispaniola, starting Saturday morning and lasting all the way through Monday. But again, the intensity that this system maintains is going to be highly determined by the exact track that it takes within this cone. If it stays farther south here over open water, it could become stronger. Same deal if it goes farther north, but it goes right over the islands. If that happens, that's when we could see a weaker storm, and that's the current solution that the Hurricane Center has right now. But a lot can change with this forecast here as we go through the next few days. So let's talk about the storm right now and where it's at. This is a look at the water vapor satellite imagery, and what we've got plotted on here is dry air and moist tropical saturated air. Obviously, the saturated and tropical air is located right there in the core of that system, indicated by the blue and the green coloring. The dry air, however, is the big obstacle, or at least one of the big obstacles that 7 is going to face here as we go through the next few days. Notice we've got a lot of that dry air up here to the north, and it's trying to wrap into the system, but we've got a pretty well consolidated storm here. It's not very well organized yet, and that's why it's still a depression, not a tropical storm. But if it can stay compact enough and kind of fend off all of this dry air on the outside, that's going to be the key to its survival here as we go through the next few days, because you can see there's a lot of dry air still ahead of this system before it reaches the more saturated environment of the Caribbean. So the dry air in the Atlantic could be working against this system from at least exploding here over the next few days. But as long as it stays insulated, it will remain intact as it makes its approach towards the Leeward Islands. All right, wind shear is the next ingredient that we got to look for to see how the storm is going to fare over the next few days. And at least in the mid-levels, we've got a fair amount of wind shear here, at least on the north side of the storm. Not so much on the south side, so that gives us a lopsided system, and it's mainly lopsided out towards the east. But how does it look on the upper levels, up around 200 to 300 millibars? Notice this pattern here in the wind streams going clockwise. That's a sign of an upper level area of high pressure, and that upper level high is going to give this system room to breathe and possibly expand here over the next few days. It's also going to help to keep some of that wind shear to the north. So that is one thing that this system does have going for it, is that upper level high in its vicinity. Water temperatures are the third ingredient that we look for as we kind of forecast the health of a system, the forecast health of a system. And you can see we've got plenty of warm water here, at least at the surface, leading all the way from its current position into the Caribbean. These are sea surface temperature anomalies. So we're looking at the surface temperature of the ocean water, and you can see it's all warmer than normal, again, from its current position as we get towards the Lesser and the Greater Antilles. But you got to look a little deeper than that, below the surface, to see exactly how much warm water we're dealing with, because surface water temperatures are not enough for these systems. So we look at what's called the ocean heat content. Basically, the brighter these colors here on the scale, the deeper that warm water goes and the more the storm can feed off of over the next few days. And you can see there's not a lot of deep warm water out here in the middle of the Atlantic. However, back to the west, as we get into the Lesser Antilles and as we get back into the Caribbean, that deeper warm water gets a little more abundant here. So that depth increases, and that's going to help this system intensify if everything else works with it as well. Remember, this is just one ingredient. If there's wind shear, if there's dry air in place, that's going to limit its strengthening. But this is definitely something that could work in its favor as it gets into the Caribbean. All right, so when should we start to watch it here in the United States? This is a map just showing the average number of days that it takes a system to reach the U.S. based on its position on the map. So this is where our system is right now. It's in the 8 to 10 day window, or at least it's getting close to the 8 day marker. 10 days would be farther off towards the east as you get closer to the 6 to 8 day mark. So this is around the 8 day marker. So we need to watch it at this point, but it's not an imminent threat, and it's got a lot of obstacles to go through before it even gets close to the United States. But it's the first system that we've had in a couple of weeks, and it's the first one that actually takes a track to the west instead of going hard to the north. So this is something that we are going to keep an eye on. Speaking of that, what do the models do with it? So there's 3 different solutions here. We've plotted all the models here on the spaghetti plots. So you can see it's a pretty tight cluster up until it gets to the Leeward Islands here. After that, you've got a batch of models that go north towards Bermuda. You've got another batch of models that take it over the Greater Antilles, but then possibly through the Straits of Florida. And the exact track here means so much for the health of this system. And then you've got some other models here that take it to the south of the island. So 3 potential scenarios that could happen with this system as it continues to move towards the east. And that's why the Hurricane Center only takes the track out 5 days, but kind of fans it out once it gets to Hispaniola, because there's a lot of questions as to whether it goes north, goes south, or continues moving out towards the west. So of all of those models, let's take the 2 that we always talk about the most, the American model, the GFS, that's going to be in yellow. And the European computer model, that's going to be in the red shading here. And wherever you see the lines, that indicates areas of low pressure. The more lines, the tighter packed those lines are together, the deeper that pressure gets. The lower the pressure is, and the stronger and more well organized this system is. So we'll start it here today. Again, it's about 800 miles to the east of the Leeward Islands. We'll start the animation and we'll stop it right here. So now we're at Friday. So we're 2 days down the road. This is when we start to see those impacts. And notice both models don't even really have this as a closed area of circulation, suggesting that this thing is going to struggle to organize and stay organized as it makes that approach to the Leeward Islands. So I think we can say with pretty good confidence that we're not expecting a hurricane here for the Antilles, or at least the Lesser Antilles, as we get into the end of the week. It's going to be very gradual to see how this thing evolves. Beyond Friday now, again, this is where the exact track comes into play, because it can either stay south of the islands, can go over the islands, or it can stay to the north. And this is where you start to see the differences. So the American computer model takes the system right over Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and towards the direction of Cuba. That's the yellow. That's why you don't see any closed circles of yellow on the map, because that would indicate a weaker system. It's dealing with high terrain. It's dealing with a lot of land interaction. The European model by Monday, so through the weekend, takes the storm just to the north of Hispaniola. And we've got some huge terrain. We'll talk about that in a second. Just to the north of Hispaniola. And notice, because of that, we've got a more organized system by Monday. So a lot of questions will need to be answered as we go through the weekend. What is the exact track of this system? Because that's going to have a huge impact on the strength, the organization, and ultimately the track beyond this point of where what will ultimately become Fiona, of where this system goes. All right, so bottom line, this is the comparison as we get into Monday, September 19th. So that snapshot that I just showed you. Again, American model gives us a weaker, kind of a sloppier system. Notice a lot of rain, though, for Hispaniola, but nothing well organized. The European model keeps it just to the north. Still a lot of rain for the DR, for Haiti, and even for Puerto Rico, but it keeps the core of that system in between Hispaniola and in between the Bahamas. So that's going to be a solution that we're going to have to keep a very close eye on. Now let's talk about that terrain. Again, Hispaniola has got some pretty big mountains. We've got Pico Duarte. It's the highest peak in the Caribbean with a 10,000 foot elevation. Beautiful, beautiful landscape out here, beautiful terrain. But this is the shredder. This is the tropical system shredder. And so if Tropical Depression 7 were to go right over Hispaniola, you're talking about some prolific rainfalls. So flooding and mudslides will be a concern for the Dominican Republic, for Haiti. But in turn, this would shred this system apart, and it would have a very hard time surviving the path beyond Hispaniola, meaning it doesn't become a concern really for Cuba, it doesn't really become a concern for the Bahamas, and it doesn't become a concern for the US. But again, this is only one of 3 solutions, so we are going to have to keep a very close eye on this. So bottom line, with Tropical Depression 7, There are many obstacles that this system is going to face before it even thinks about getting close to the United States. The greatest impacts, though, will be for the Greater Antilles as we get into this weekend, from the British Virgin Islands all the way through Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, and then ultimately as we get into Cuba. The U.S., in the meantime, is going to monitor this. We will keep a very close eye on this, especially here in Houston, Texas, because if it takes that path where it goes just to the north of the Greater Antilles and ends up in the Gulf of Mexico, that's when it will become more of a concern to us. And the timing for that would be a week from now, about mid to late next week. So this is still well down the road, and it's not something that we need to worry about right now. But we are going to be keeping you updated here over the next few days on the evolution of this system, on the strength of this system, and on the potential path. Until then, we've got social media. You can stay in touch with us there. You can stay tuned with the latest updates on this YouTube channel, of course, online and on TV. But that's what we got for you now. We'll see you back next time for our next Tropical Update.